I guess why I'm asking about Argentina, because this doesn't sound like it's a last minute, let's get out of here. It sounds like this was an operation that was planned out for
and detailed.
years.
It's planned for years, but it's put into action in 1943 after the defeats at Stalingrad and then Kursk, biggest tank battle of World War II. And at that stage, Martin Bormann, who people refer to as Hitler's secretary, he's the secretary of the Nazi Party.
He is very, very...
Seems to be the mastermind.
Yeah, he seems very interesting because he comes up a lot in your book. And how important was he in terms of...
He's the most powerful man in Germany.
Really?
From 1943, you don't even get through the door of the Reich Chancellery. You don't even see Hitler. It doesn't matter who you are, Himmler, Goering, Goebbels, anybody.
Why do you think in school and whenever you're not taught about
his name never really comes up?
I think he's had really good post-war press.
Oh, really?
You know, and if you watch Downfall, which I do occasionally, that great film about Hitler's death, The Last Days in the Bunker, perpetuated by thousands of memes for everything from to
some of them are brilliant.
Hitler not being able to get pizza of the right sort in Berlin at the end of the war. And if you watch that, Bormann is a bloke in a brown suit standing in a corner.
Yeah.
And he's not. I mean, they call him the Telex General. He's in charge of every Gauleiter in every city and town in Germany. He's got an intelligence network that rivals the SS and Gestapo. And with his friend Gestapo Müller, who's running both SD and Gestapo at the end of the war, they know everybody. And they've got dirt on everybody as well. Bormann gets away. I mean, one of the reasons I want to go to this particular place in America at the moment is there are documents there which show that Bormann lived in Argentina post-war, and also that Hitler did not die in the bunker. So there you go. You've got a bit of an exclusive there, guys. I'll tell you whose they were. Apart from I now have access, when I can get there, to over 1,000 pages of documents from the personal collection of a senior Nazi collected between 1945 and 1973. I also have 400 pages of handwritten notes by this Nazi, which have never been translated.
So, Gerard, like you have all this information and it's so credible, and you also take in consideration, Stephen actually brought up a good point before we started recording. It was like the Nuremberg Trials. Martin Bormann was trialed while Hitler wasn't. That's fair. I always thought that was a bit weird.
He was tried and found guilty in absentia of crimes against humanity. Adolf Hitler's never mentioned on the Nuremberg charge sheet.
Like, why is that?
They don't have Bormann's body and they don't have Hitler's body, right? That's the two things. Yeah. That's the one thing those two characters have in common. Mm-hmm. And yet they decide that Martin Bormann is to be tried in absentia, which makes you think that Martin Bormann is alive somewhere, but they don't even put Hitler on the charge sheet. Now, I think that's all part of a deal that is done between Martin Bormann and the head of OSS, Alan Dulles, to enable Bormann and his friends and his Führer to escape to a life in the sun. And in return, America gets the whole of the V-2 rocket program. They get Hans Kammler and his research into nukes. They get all the nuclear program research. They also get a huge amount of uranium, which is used in one of the two bombs that actually ends the war by dropping on Japan, which is taken to America on a submarine called U-23. I can never remember. U-234 is the submarine, I think, but U-235 is the chemical element number for uranium. So I always get those two confused. So the sub is either U-234, which is carrying a whole bunch of U-235, or the sub is U-235, which is carrying a whole bunch of U-234. And it's met at the dock where it surrenders in New England by Oppenheimer, the man who's running the Manhattan Project. The Americans only have enough fissile material for one nuclear bomb, the one they drop on Hiroshima. They do not have enough material for further bombs. And Martin Bormann hands them every bit of nuclear material that he can get his hands on in a submarine, which is supposedly on its way to Japan. But the Japanese officers on board commit suicide in the middle of the Atlantic and throw themselves overboard. And the submarine puts up the skull and crossbones and surrenders to the American fleet. At the same time, the story that we're told about the surrender of the man who goes on to put The Americans on the moon, Werner von Braun and his rocket team from Peenemünde, that's a complete lie. They weren't just found.
Yeah.
There's material out there which shows that Ian Fleming, Commander Ian Fleming, the man who goes on to write James Bond books, Fleming ran an operation called 30 Assault Unit at the end of World War II. 30 Assault Unit, also known as Fleming's Red Indians, they went in ahead of British and American troops into what were probably going to be designated as Soviet zones of authority, and they picked up people, information, and anything else they could find. Now, 30AU picked up all of von Braun's scientists and von Braun himself and brought them and gave them to Patton's Third Army. They didn't just walk up and say, hello, we're the guys who built the rockets. We knew where they lived. Now, the only way we could have known where they lived is if we'd had intelligence from a very senior figure within the Nazi organization. And that senior figure, in my mind, is Martin Bormann, who did the deal with Alan Dulles to give them a whole bunch of things.
I think that's what's so interesting, so credible about this. I think a lot of people don't understand the connections the Nazi Party actually had with American officials and Alan Dulles, you mentioned there, but also like Operation Paperclip, which a lot of people, that's confirmed. So once you accept that, the next phase isn't too far away, isn't too much of a jump.
Martin Bormann sat next to Alan Dulles in the Führer's box in the 1936 Munich Olympics.
So weird, so dark, isn't it?
And his brother ran a major American corporate firm in Germany before the war started. Remember, the Americans didn't get into the war until 1941, Pearl Harbor. We'd been fighting for 2.5 years by that stage. Guys, the Ford Motor Company. Let's just take the Ford Motor Company. The Ford Motor Company. That wonderful person, Henry Ford, who received Hitler's highest civilian medal for his work on eugenics and hating Jews. Henry Ford's companies in Germany created and produced over a third of the vehicles that the Nazis' army used. So on D-Day, you have American, British, and Canadian forces landing on the beaches of France, driving Ford motor vehicles, meeting German forces driving Ford motor vehicles.
It's crazy.
And guess who's making the money out of it?
Yeah, I think that's really important that you got to look at. Is there any other part? Obviously, there's countless.
International business machines prepared the counting machines, the early computers that counted those people going in and out of the concentration camps and the murder camps that the Nazis set up. It goes so deep, right, that Henry Ford's German factories were off the bombing lists. You could not bomb the Ford Company German plants if you were an American or British bomber. And so towards the end of the war, an American squadron couldn't get to its own target for bad weather reasons. So they dropped their bombs on one of Ford's major production facilities in Germany.
So was this like...
Hang on, sorry guys. The Ford Motor Company sued the American government after World War II.
Really?
$5 in damages.
Oh my God. But is it... We know now, and obviously through your research, we know the connections they have with American businesses, but was this normal at the time? Did the American government know?
It was normal. It's normal now, we do business with Saudi Arabia. We do business with
Yemen.
We do business with anybody who'll give us money for our arms and anything else we can flog around the world. The same was true in the 1930s. Hitler was Time magazine's Man of the Year in 1937.
That's mental. That is crazy.
Germany was completely screwed before he took power.
Yeah.
See, during your book as well, Gerard, I was reading, and there's a lot of talk about there was an agreement between the Allies and the Nazis because they were obviously all thinking about the Soviets and what led to what eventually became the Cold War. Was that did that ever go like close to fruition, or
not in terms of actually men on the ground fighting each other?
Yeah.
But there was a secret army which I now have even more details of, which Der Spiegel, one of the great German magazines, exposed 3 or 4 years ago, of 20,000 former Waffen-SS officers and men continually training after the war with American help, so they could put 20,000 Germans back into the field against the Soviets if they needed them. The idea of denazification in Germany is complete and total rubbish. They didn't denazify anybody. I mean, when General Patton took the surrender of SS divisions in World War II, at the end of World War II, he allowed their officers to keep their personal sidearms.
Really?
And allowed them to stay in their regimental formations because Patton wanted to throw them across the Elbe at the Soviets. Probably one of the reasons why Patton dies at the end of World War II, because Eisenhower didn't want anything happening. But Patton dies in some very weird circumstances. And I know I'm a conspiracy theorist. So
I think all this information that makes it so much believable, or more believable, that Hitler could have orchestrated an escape or an agreement where he was allowed to escape because they were so intertwined in terms of like American government, American companies, and the Nazi Party.
I don't think Truman knew. And I'm pretty damn sure that Eisenhower didn't know. And I don't want to go into all this sort of deep state things, but there are two Americas. Eisenhower and John F. Kennedy both talked about them. Eisenhower is the first guy to say publicly that the military-industrial complex in America is the most dangerous thing to America, the most dangerous threat to American democracy. And he said that as he left the presidency. He knew what was going on. The military-industrial complex dominates America.
Yes.
And, when you have people like former President George Bush Sr., ex-head of the CIA, he knew exactly what went on at the end of the war and what was going on after it.